Victoria Ashford's one that got away was back in town, so I was getting out of the way. After all, I was just the husband by contract, a placeholder. Still, I have a proposition for you, Mr. Vance. You interested? I said, smiling at the man I presumed to be my wife's past love. He looked intrigued. Oh, I'm listening. I slid a file across the polished table of the quiet coffee shop. Lacing my fingers under my chin, I leaned forward. This is a comprehensive dossier on Ms. Ashford's current interests, habits, and preferences. I paused for effect. $50,000. Cash. He leaned back in his chair, a glint in his eye. And why would I pay that much for a report? I was ready for that. I cleared my throat. Mr. Vance, how long have you been out of the country? He looked down, his voice a low murmur. 7 years. 7 years. I repeated, clapping my hands together once. You're 28 now, which means you and Victoria haven't seen each other since you were 21. A lot can change in 7 years. People aren't static. His interest deepened. He gestured with his chin for me to continue. My smile widened. This was a big sale. I couldn't mess it up. You missed her entire early 20s. That's a formative period. 7 years is long enough for someone's entire personality to shift, especially during a time like that. My voice was confident, and he straightened up in his seat. The bait was taken. For example, I said, grabbing a napkin and a pen. Victoria used to hate Brussels sprouts. You remember that, right? He nodded. Well, now she loves them. Can't get enough. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. She used to wear bright colors, lots of loose, comfortable stuff. Now, her tastes have changed completely. She's all about dark, form-fitting power suits that show off her figure. She used to love cheesy rom-coms. Now she binges gritty crime dramas on HBO. I continued my analysis, listing off several more of Victoria's transformations. Seeing him still hesitating, a slight frown on his face, I knew I needed the final push. The guy was a little slow on the uptake. Behold, I pulled out my MacBook, opening a sleek keynote presentation I'd prepared. I walked him through it, slide by slide, analyzing the current situation until my throat was dry. I grabbed his untouched latte and downed it in one go. So, you see, 50 grand is a bargain. This is a can't-lose investment. 50 grand buys you a 7-year shortcut. The information is 100% accurate, based on years of my own personal, hands-on research. Once you're completely up to speed on her likes and dislikes, you'll be able to reconnect with her seamlessly. Your relationship will be back on track in no time. After my spiel, the man, Julian Vance, stared at me with a mix of curiosity and confusion. You're just giving up? That easily? You're not going to fight for her? What if she's actually started to fall for you? I laughed and shook my head. Buddy, do you really think an employee falls in love with their boss? I'm just a guy doing a job. The contract is up. The real deal is back in town, and it's my time to bow out. A good employee knows when to make a graceful exit without being told. Besides, how am I supposed to compete with a guy like you? Successful, sophisticated, the whole package. He watched me for a few long seconds, as if trying to gauge my sincerity. Finally, a faint smile touched his lips. You make a good case. He tapped the file. The deal is fine. In fact, I'll give you 100,000. My eyes widened. However, he continued, his gaze turning intense, almost admiring. You have to. I instinctively clenched. Look, I don't swing that way. Absolutely not. What? He looked genuinely confused. Then his brow furrowed as he realized what I was implying. I don't either. He slid a business card across the table. I want you to come work for me. Work for you. MMMHM. A full smile spread across his face as he picked up his own coffee. I think you're a man of considerable talent. Come to my company. I'll pay you far more than she ever did. I glanced at the card, then back at him, smiling. What talent? I clean, I cook. I'm basically a glorified house husband. You're overestimating me. He waited until I finished, then nodded slowly. Mr. Miller, you're far too modest. He signed the simple agreement I'd printed, pushed it toward me and stood, extending his hand. A pleasure doing business with you. I stared at him for a moment, then stood and shook his hand firmly. Pleasure's all mine. Hello? Anyone home? I whispered, cracking the apartment door open and peeking inside. Phew, Victoria wasn't in sight. If she ever found out I sold her personal data, she'd probably have me killed. Relaxing, I checked the time and headed for the kitchen to start dinner. My culinary skills were the main reason I'd kept this gig for so long. I wasn't a Michelin star chef, but my food had its own flair. It's no exaggeration to say I'd been cooking since I was 6, learning at the knee of my grandfather, a James Beard award-winning chef. I trained with him for 12 solid years, right up until I turned 18. If my dad hadn't chased me with a flip-flop and forced me to go to college, I probably would have taken over the family restaurant. But if I had, I never would have met Victoria Ashford. Her family's longtime private chef had passed away, and for some reason, she developed a taste for my cooking. It was like my food was laced with something she couldn't resist. At a campus job fair, her company's HR recruiter spotted me. After a few perfunctory questions about my business major, she asked out of the blue if I knew how to cook. Next thing I knew, I had a job offer. Pure luck. On my first day, her executive assistant took me straight to the penthouse office. The moment I saw Victoria, I knew she was a force of nature. The sheer power rolling off her was intimidating. She tossed a contract onto her massive desk. Fake marriage. The salary is $200,000 a year. I didn't hear anything else after $200,000. You got it, boss. Mission accepted. I signed the papers so fast I was afraid she'd change her mind. After scribbling my name, I let out a breath and looked up at her cautiously. By the way, who is this? Victoria Ashford named in the contract. I didn't even know her name at the time. She gave me a strange look. You signed it without knowing who it was for? Hey, you're complaining that I was too efficient? I smiled, keeping one copy of the contract for myself and handing her the other with both hands. No problem. For that kind of money, I'd marry a farm animal if I had to. The moment the words left my mouth, her assistant started frantically gesturing at me from the side, mouthing something. I squinted. That is the CEO's name. Oh crap. I slowly lifted my gaze to find Victoria's brow deeply furrowed, a storm cloud gathering over her face. Well, there goes the best-paying job I ever had. But just as I thought it was over, her expression flickered, from annoyed to contemplative and back again. She tapped her pen on the desk, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump echoing my own heartbeat. Fine, she finally sighed, waving a dismissive hand as if she couldn't bear to look at me anymore. Her assistant also seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and ushered me out. As the door closed, I glanced back. She was looking my way, her eyes sharp as daggers. I quickly shut the door. Outside, I tried to calm my racing heart. I was about to ask the assistant where my department was when she turned to me with a bright smile. Congratulations, Mr. Miller. It will be a pleasure working with you. Mr. Miller? I asked, pointing at myself, confused. She nodded, her smile unwavering. Yes, didn't you read the fine print? The contract states that in addition to being her husband, you're also her executive assistant, chauffeur, and personal chef. My brain short-circuited. I'd been had 3 jobs in one, but the contract was signed. My heart sank. So, my office is? The assistant pointed back at the door we just exited. Your desk is right next to the CEO's. What? I was horrified. How was I ever supposed to slack off? She must have seen the look on my face, because she let out a soft laugh. Don't worry, she's a great boss. She waved me along. I'll take you to get your ID and finish the onboarding process now. Okay, I said, mustering what little energy I had left. Before I left, I glanced back at the office door one last time and noticed it was cracked open. Hadn't we closed it all the way? And so, I became Victoria Ashford's assistant. It was a tough gig, having the boss's eyes on you constantly, but that's a story for another time. I started humming a cheerful tune as I walked toward the kitchen, my mood buoyed by the $100,000 that was now pending in my account. Who wouldn't be happy? Where have you been? A cool voice asked, stopping my jaunty steps dead in their tracks. I turned. Victoria was leaning over the coffee table in front of the sofa, reviewing a document. Damn it, the sofa had blocked her from my view. Boss, you're home early. Dinner's not ready yet, I said, sidling up to her like a suck-up. Victoria glanced up at me, her voice flat and unreadable. Where were you? The question sent a jolt through me. Had she found out I'd met with her old flame? Oh, nowhere special. We were running low on groceries, so I went to the store. I held up the bag in my hand. I also picked up some of that artisanal fried chicken from the place you like in Brooklyn. I was going to try and replicate the recipe. That way, whenever you're craving it at home, I can just make it for you. I smiled at her, my tone perfectly natural. I thought ahead. anticipating just this kind of interrogation. On the way back, I'd stopped for groceries and the chicken as my alibi. Victoria studied me for a long moment. That's very thoughtful. Thank you. She looked back down at her file, her expression hidden. It's my pleasure to be of service, boss. Was it my imagination? Or did the hand she was signing with pause for a fraction of a second? She didn't reply, just kept working. I took that as my cue to leave her alone and tiptoed into the kitchen. Humming softly, I quickly whipped up several dishes. Boss, dinner's ready. I called out. Victoria gathered her documents and walked over, her steps seeming almost brisk. Was my boss secretly a foodie? The meal wasn't extravagant, but it was delicious. We sat across from each other. I dug in heartily. I'd only had that one latte at the coffee shop, paid for by Mr. Vance, and I hadn't felt right ordering food on his dime. Victoria was the picture of elegance, eating in small, graceful bites. Every movement was so refined. If I'd had a camera, the photos would have been wallpaper-worthy. Okay, maybe I was laying it on a bit thick. The woman across from me was starting to notice my staring. I'm full, Victoria said, putting down her chopsticks and dabbing her mouth with a napkin. She stood up to leave. I shot out a hand and grabbed her wrist. Her cool eyes blinked, a flicker of surprise in them as her gaze traveled from my hand to my face. What is it? I pointed at the nearly full plate in front of her, my face a mask of anguish. Boss, was the food not to your liking today? You barely ate anything. Leaving food on the plate was a direct insult to my craft. You can insult my character, but you do not insult my cooking. Victoria was silent for a moment. Was there really something wrong with the food? In a flash, before she could stop me, I grabbed her chopsticks from the table, took a large bite from her plate, and stuffed it in my mouth. Tastes fine to me. It's delicious, actually, I mumbled, looking at her. Her eyes, which had been fixed on my mouth, darted away. She sighed. The food is excellent, Leo. I just don't have much of an appetite today. Oh, thank God. I knew my skills couldn't have failed me. I exhaled, wiping a bead of sweat from my brow. My talent was still intact. Your hand, Victoria reminded me. I looked down and realized I was still gripping my boss's wrist. Blasphemy, though it was very soft and smooth. I let go instantly. Sorry, boss. So sorry. Victoria pulled her hand back, shaking her head slightly. It's fine. I have to get back to work. She turned to leave, her gaze lingering for a second on the chopsticks I just used before she walked away. Keep up the great work, boss. I yelled after her. She paused. Maybe don't yell that. It's a little awkward. Okay. Boss, don't keep up the great work. She gave me a look one might reserve for a complete idiot, which was exactly my strategy. The less of a threat I appeared, the more my boss would trust me. It was a survival tactic. After cleaning the dishes, I settled onto the couch, scrolling through my phone while Victoria worked at the large dining table. It was a strange feeling. It was the weekend, so it was perfectly normal for me, the employee, to be relaxing. But there was a distinct, illicit pleasure in lounging around while my boss was grinding away. After a while, my eyes started to get tired, but a strange sense of unease crept over me. It felt like being in school, secretly reading a novel under your desk, only to look up and find the teacher staring at you through the classroom's back window. I could feel a pair of eyes on me. I glanced over. Victoria was rubbing her temples, a look of exhaustion on her face. Being the boss isn't easy, either. I shook my head, got up, and went to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee. As I came out, I felt the stare again. I turned my head stiffly, but she was still engrossed in her documents. Was I just imagining things? I decided to test it. Boss, want some coffee? The instant the words left my mouth, the sound of a file slapping down on the table was sharp and clear. Yes. Her reply was so quick. It was as if she'd been waiting for me to ask. Right, one moment. I immediately turned and went to brew another cup. When it was ready, I stood by her as she took a small sip before diving back into her work. With nothing better to do, I lingered behind her, looking over her shoulder. Boss, is the data in that section right? Victoria turned her head, holding up the file. This? I nodded. Based on the current market trends, that company shouldn't be able to. I trailed off, explaining my reasoning. So I think there has to be a mistake there. Only after I'd finished my tirade did I realize I'd overstepped. I looked at Victoria. She was staring at me intently, her eyes filled with a strange, unreadable emotion. Ha ha! I laughed nervously, scratching the back of my head, just thinking out loud, "Boss, don't mind me. Carry on." She continued to stare at me. A moment later, a different kind of light flickered in her eyes before she looked away. "You're right." She put the file down and looked at me again with that odd expression. "Leo, you need to have more confidence in yourself. You're very good at this. The suggestions you've made in the past have always been useful." I was stunned for a second, then grinned. "Haha. Thanks for the compliment, boss. It's the first time anyone's ever said that to me." Victoria's eyes lowered. She waved a hand. "Go on. Do your own thing." I could tell her mood had soured, though I had no idea why. Maybe rich people just had more complicated problems. Not like me. I was happy with every dollar I earned. The days rolled on. I cooked new and inventive meals, drove the car, and played the part of the assistant. Occasionally, I'd sneak a glance at the secretary's amazing legs, only to be caught by Victoria, who would shoot me a look of pure disdain. That woman was a true competitor. She had to win at everything. Every time I looked at the secretary, Victoria would show up the next day in an outfit that was even more distracting. It was like she was trying to show off, and she'd only do it when we were alone in the office. And when I say she'd change, I mean she'd change. She had no sense of personal space. She'd slip off her shoes right in front of me and slowly, deliberately, pull on a pair of silk stockings, black, white, patterned, you name it. Sometimes I'd find myself thinking, "Thank God you don't have foot odor, boss." No assistant could tolerate that. But I couldn't say a word. Every time I opened my mouth to suggest a little more discretion, her glare was like a physical blow, stopping the words in my throat. Still, life was good. The 200 grand a year was more than enough to keep me happy. "Boss? Boss," I said, bringing the car to a smooth stop. Victoria was asleep in the back seat. She was even drooling a little. It was almost cute. No, that's a dangerous thought. This was not something I was supposed to see. If she knew, she'd probably have me whacked to silence me. I quickly grabbed a tissue and leaned back, intending to gently wipe her mouth. Her lips were a soft, rosy pink. They looked inviting. I dabbed her mouth and found myself staring for a second too long. I shook my head, snapping out of it, "Treason." Fortunately, she was dead to the world. She didn't even stir. "Boss, we're home," I called out. Victoria slowly opened her eyes, looking at me with a dazed expression. "We're here. We're here." I got out, walked around, and opened the back door for her like a proper chauffeur. No one could say I wasn't dedicated to my service. Victoria seemed pleased. She touched her lips where I just wiped them, and a tiny, almost imperceptible smile played on her face. "See? A sign of a satisfied customer." I went to the trunk to get the gifts. Today we were visiting my dear in-laws. You heard me right, folks. The day after I was hired, Victoria dragged me to City Hall to get a marriage license, and then we went straight to meet her parents. That's when I finally understood why she was in such a hurry to get married. She was a powerhouse, completely dedicated to her career, but her parents wanted her to settle down and were constantly setting her up on blind dates. She was fed up with it and came up with the idea of finding a fake husband. I was just the lucky guy with the right skill set who got picked. It just goes to show, having a practical skill is always a good thing. You'll never starve. The moment we walked in, my father and mother-in-law greeted me warmly. "You're here. You shouldn't have brought gifts. Are you treating this like someone else's house?" They weren't the arrogant rich people you see in movies. At first glance, they were just a normal, friendly couple. "Oh, have you lost weight again? Have you been eating properly?" my mother-in-law asked, scrutinizing me from every angle. Then she looked at Victoria and muttered, "You, on the other hand, have put on weight, especially around your stomach. You look like you're pregnant. You should eat less." Victoria's face fell, her eyes widening in disbelief. Was this really her own mother? Seeing her expression, I quickly jumped in. "It's just that Vic has been working so hard lately, so I thought she could use some extra nourishment. And besides, I think she looks best at this weight." My mother-in-law laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "You always stick up for her." I shot a grin at Victoria, hoping for a little credit, but she had turned her head away. Was she mad? Girls usually like to be told they're thin. Maybe my comment came off as disingenuous. Man, this job was hard. I cooked lunch with my mother-in-law. Victoria tried to help, but after she nearly set a pan on fire and ended up with a face full of soot, her mother banished her from the kitchen. "My dear child, are you trying to murder your husband and your own mother?" she exclaimed, pushing a soot-faced Victoria toward the bathroom. Go wash your face before the neighbors see you and think we've adopted a coal miner. Her mother's mouth was a machine gun of wisecracks, leaving Victoria speechless. How did Victoria end up so quiet? Who did she take after? While they were busy, I kept my hands moving. All right, my little vegetables. Become one with the pan. Soon, a full spread of dishes covered the table. Victoria saw how beautiful everything looked, and after taking a bite, realized it tasted even better. Her mood soured even more. She shot me a sharp look. Leo, when we get home, you're teaching me. Before I could answer, her mother slapped her hand away. With your skills? I think not. If you cause a fatality, your father and I will have to arrange the funeral. My mother-in-law's morbid humor was relentless. Then her eyes twinkled. Although, creating a different kind of life is perfectly acceptable. Your father and I are waiting. The chopsticks in my hand froze mid-air. Victoria, who was stuffing a bite of food into her mouth, hadn't caught on yet, her lips glistening. She looked at her mom in confusion. What do you mean, Mom? I know my cooking is. She trailed off as the meaning finally dawned on her. Seeing her opportunity, her mom pounced. So, when are you two planning on it? At the question, Victoria hesitated. I swallowed the food in my mouth. Time for me to step up. I had to show my boss that her fake husband was worth every penny. I turned and said with a smile, Mom, Vic and we're working on it, Mom. You don't need to worry. Victoria cut in. My eyes widened. I shot her a questioning look, but she refused to meet my gaze, focusing intently on her food. Ha ha ha. That's wonderful. Just wonderful. My mother-in-law beamed, piling food onto both our plates. Eat up. You'll need your strength, she said, winking at me. I got the message. She wanted me to work hard tonight. But, ma'am, this is a two-person job. That night, Victoria and I shared a room. The plan was for me to sleep on a makeshift bed on the floor, while she took the rail bed. To avoid her parents' suspicion, we always waited until they were asleep before setting up my bedding. But tonight, it seemed they were determined to stay up. Dad, Mom, aren't you going to bed yet? I asked, walking out of the room and pretending to get a glass of water. My mother-in-law smiled. Is the TV too loud? Sorry, I'll turn it down. No, that's not it, I said, waving my hands. I was just worried you might be having trouble sleeping. My father-in-law chuckled. We're fine. Don't let our age fool you. We can binge-watch with the best of them. This show is pretty good. Want to join us? I glanced at the screen. It was a popular historical drama. I think I'll pass. I smiled. History shows just make me sleepy. I put my glass down. Well, I won't keep you from your show. I'm heading to bed. Good night, son. I sighed and slipped back into the room. Victoria was propped up in bed, reading a book. Her silky black hair was down, and she looked radiant after her shower, her skin flushed and glowing. What a mess. I sighed again and started pulling blankets out of the closet. What are you doing? Victoria's voice, soft and even, came from the bed. I looked at her, my arms full of bedding. Making my bed. Going to sleep. After I spoke, she put her book down. After a moment's hesitation, she patted the empty space beside her. You can sleep here tonight. I finally noticed she wasn't in the middle of the bed, but on one side. I don't think that's a good idea. My parents could knock at any moment. It would be hard to explain. She had a point. Okay then. Thanks for the accommodation. I put the bedding back in the closet and carefully lifted a corner of the duvet to get into bed. The moment I settled in, I could feel her whole body tense up. I felt just as awkward, every muscle in my body rigid. This was ridiculous. Just as I was thinking that, there was a knock on the door. Victoria, Leo, are you two asleep? I practically leaped out of bed, relieved to escape the awkwardness. When I opened the door, my mother-in-law was standing there with 2 glasses of milk. A glass of warm milk before bed helps you sleep, she said, handing me the tray. I quickly took it. Just leave the glasses when you're done. We'll wash them tomorrow, she added with emphasis, then smiled and closed her own door. I stood there for a moment before carrying the tray over to the bed. Boss. Victoria held out a hand, and I passed her a glass. She took a sip, and her eyebrows shot up, a strange expression on her face. What's wrong, boss? I asked anxiously. She shook her head. Nothing. This milk is from my grandparents' farm. It has a unique taste. You might not like it. With that, she drained the glass. I took her empty glass, placed it on the tray, and drank my own. It did taste different, but it was fine. I finished it in a few gulps. Back in bed, I scrolled on my phone for a bit. It was past midnight, and my eyelids felt heavy. But Victoria was still engrossed in her book. "Boss, I'm turning in," I announced. She just nodded vaguely, not looking up. Fine by me. I was exhausted, for some reason. The moment my head hit the pillow, I was out. When I woke up, it was morning. Victoria was still fast asleep beside me. Her cheeks flushed, her hair a mess, and the blankets in disarray. So the great Victoria Ashford was a messy sleeper. I carefully got out of bed, feeling a wave of dizziness that almost made me fall. It wasn't surprising. It seemed my body wasn't compatible with rich people's beds. Ever since I'd moved in with Victoria, I'd wake up feeling sore every so often. I shook my head, which felt fuzzy. I must not have slept well. I'd had a lot of weird dreams, a sign of poor sleep quality. This bed was just too soft. I prefer a firm mattress. After a quick wash, I went to make breakfast. "Leo, how did you sleep last night?" my mother-in-law asked, emerging from her room with a smile. I couldn't very well say I slept terribly. "Great. Slept like a log," I said, putting the breakfast on the table. "That's good. That's good." She beamed, her eyes fixed on me in a way that made me feel a little uneasy. Soon after, Victoria came out, already dressed and looking sharp. "Victoria, how did you sleep?" her mother asked again. Victoria, in the middle of drinking water, paused. "It was fine," she replied softly. "Fine is good. Fine is good." We finished breakfast in that strangely intense atmosphere. We had to go to the office today, and there was a gala tonight, so we left early to head back to the city. After a full day of corporate drudgery, the evening finally arrived. "Boss, everything's ready. Should we head out now?" I asked, looking at Victoria in her stunning evening gown. She nodded, her eyes lingering on me for a moment. "The suit. It looks good on you." Then she turned and got into the car. I tugged at my tie, which felt ridiculously tight, but a compliment was a compliment, and I felt a small thrill of pleasure. I drove us to the hotel. The party was already in full swing, a bustling sea of C-suite executives and business elites, all mingling, networking, and toasting each other. It was quite a scene. Our main objective tonight was to secure a few new partnerships. "Victoria, so glad you could make it." People flocked to her as soon as she entered, glasses raised. Victoria maintained her cool, composed demeanor as she chatted with them. I stayed close by, not drinking, just sipping on some fruit juice and nibbling on desserts. It was a pretty sweet gig. "Excuse me, sir. Might I have a word?" A woman with a killer figure and smoldering eyes slinked over, holding a glass of champagne. "Sorry, not interested," I said flatly. The woman froze, then shot me a venomous glare before stalking off. I didn't care. I'd seen her earlier, prowling the room, draping herself over a series of greasy-looking executives. She was clearly hunting for a sugar daddy. I popped a mini cupcake into my mouth. Victoria's business talk was painfully boring, so I found a quiet corner to sit and people watch. "Where is it? Where could it be?" a young woman muttered, bent over and frantically searching the floor nearby, her face etched with anxiety. She was so focused on her search that she didn't see me and walked headfirst into my leg. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she yelped, stumbling back and quickly apologizing. "It's fine," I said, shaking my head. "Looking for something?" She looked up at me and nodded. "Yes, a small charm. It looks like this." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. It was a tiny, rather cute little figurine. I handed her phone back and took a good look at her, my gaze lingering long enough to make her blush and fidget uncomfortably. Ishuj." "Wait here," I said, getting up and striding into the crowd. The girl watched, puzzled, as I disappeared. A few minutes later, I returned, weaving through the partygoers to find her still standing there, looking a bit lost. She was obedient. I'll give her that. As I approached, she took a few anxious steps toward me. I smiled and revealed the hand I'd been hiding behind my back. "Here you go." In my palm was the little charm. Her eyes widened in astonishment. She took it, clutching it to her chest, and thanked me profusely. Thank you so much." She looked down at the charm with immense relief. "It was a gift from my mother. I'm so glad you found it." I waved a hand. "Just be more careful next time." She nodded eagerly. "But how did you find it?" I looked everywhere. I grinned, picked up another cupcake, and flicked it into my mouth with my index finger. That's a secret. She pouted for a second. Then her expression softened back into gratitude. Well, thank you again. I owe you one. If you ever need anything, please let me know. I just waved my hand dismissively. It was nothing, really. Seeing my resolute expression, she didn't press the issue. Just then, a middle-aged man called her name. She smiled, waved at me, and left with him. I watched her go before returning to my seat and my cupcakes. Finding that little thing had actually been a bit of a challenge. Was she pretty? Yeah, gorgeous. I answered automatically before I realized what I'd said. I looked up to see Victoria standing beside me. Haha, boss, when did you get here? I froze, the fork in my hand hovering. I offered her the cupcake. Want some? Victoria glanced at the pastry in my hand, then looked away. No, thank you. Haha. More for me then. I ate it, and immediately wanted to slap myself. You're quite the smooth operator, aren't you? Looks like you've had a lot of practice, Victoria said, her tone laced with something acidic. I didn't know how to respond, so I just chuckled nervously. Just lucky, I guess. You? She was about to say more when a balding man approached. Victoria. What are you doing hiding over here? He boomed, sidling up with a drink in his hand. I recognized him, Mr. Peterson, the CEO of a major tech firm, a company much larger than Victoria's. He held the key to several projects Victoria desperately needed. If she landed them, the company's annual profits would double. Victoria stood up. Mr. Peterson, you flatter me. It's just that everyone is so enthusiastic. I needed a moment to catch my breath. They exchanged a few pleasantries before getting down to business. Victoria, I'm very interested in a partnership, and I have great faith in your company. But there's a lot of competition. It's a tough choice. He said it with a meaningful look, his eyes shamelessly raking over her. Victoria pretended not to understand. I'm confident our company offers the best value. You've seen our proposal. Our products are top of the line. Mr. Peterson, if you choose to work with us, I'm sure it will be a very fruitful collaboration. Oh, he drew the word out. Victoria pressed on. We can even offer a more favorable rate. We can discuss terms that work for you. At that, Mr. Peterson smiled and raised his glass to clink with hers. Excellent. Perhaps we can find somewhere a little quieter to discuss the details. His eyes were burning with raw desire. Victoria's jaw tightened. I could see the anger simmering just beneath the surface. I stepped forward, smiled, and clinked my own glass against his. He frowned, looking at me with disdain. And who the hell are you? Before I could answer, Victoria stepped in front of me. He's my husband, and I'd thank you to watch your mouth. I hadn't expected her to be so direct. I gently pushed her back a few steps, ignoring the surprisingly soft texture my hand brushed against. Peterson looked ready to explode. I leaned in close, smiling, and whispered a few sentences in his ear. His frown deepened. You think I'd believe you? He hissed. I can't guarantee anything, I replied smoothly. I'm just offering a helpful tip. We were at a standoff. Something wrong here? A new voice cut in. I looked over and saw the young woman I'd helped, standing next to the middle-aged man from before. She gave me a playful wink. Mr. Peterson, the man said. Let's leave it at that. I have full confidence in Ms. Ashford's capabilities. Peterson's face changed. He shot a heavy look at Victoria, then at me, his eyes narrowing. Ha ha ha, you're right, of course. He turned back to Victoria with a forced smile. To a successful partnership. Victoria raised her glass. To our partnership. They chatted for a few more minutes before the man and the young woman excused themselves. As she left, the girl waved at me again. I guess I really did earn that favor. Peterson downed his drink, looked at me and Victoria and said with a tight smile, You've got yourself one hell of an assistant. Then his face turned grim, and he stormed away. What did you say to him? Victoria asked, coming to my side. I just waved my hand. Oh, nothing much. Just told him about some interesting rumors I'd heard recently. She looked at me, puzzled, but didn't press further. I watched Peterson's retreating back. Everyone has secrets, and no wall is perfectly soundproof. And often, it's the people who seem insignificant who hold the most valuable, most hidden information. The trick is knowing how to get on their good side. Then, a lot of problems just solve themselves. The party ended, and I drove us home. Victoria leaned against the headrest, rubbing her temples, looking exhausted. The workload lately had been immense. She was running on fumes. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, hesitating for a moment before speaking. Boss, after I drop you off, would it be okay if I borrowed the car for a bit? What for? She asked, her brow furrowed. I smiled. Well, our contract officially ends tomorrow. I figured I'd use the car now to move my stuff out of the apartment. It would be a big help. Is that okay? The back seat was silent for a long time. Finally, I heard her quiet voice. Do what you want. Thanks, boss, I said, my mood lifting as I drove toward the apartment. As soon as we got back, I started hauling my already packed boxes out. Victoria sat on the living room sofa, reading a book, not saying a word. I finished loading everything into the trunk. See you tomorrow, boss. Victoria didn't answer, her eyes still glued to her book. I sighed, then quietly closed the door behind me. Driving away, I felt a pang of melancholy. After tomorrow, I'd be unemployed, but it wasn't all bad. Victoria had treated me well these past 3 years. The work was demanding, but she'd gradually included me in major projects, and the bonuses and profit sharing were enough for me to live comfortably for a while. Hell yeah! With a newfound sense of freedom, I hit the road. I had to get out of town. If Victoria ever found out I'd sold her personal information for cash, I'd be toast. I didn't stay in one place for long. I went on a massive road trip. I saw the Grand Canyon, hiked through Zion, ate my way through New Orleans, and spent time in a quiet cabin in the Pacific Northwest. I drove the Pacific Coast Highway, saw Mount Rainier, and explored the Painted Desert. 3 months flew by. I felt like a new person, tanned and rejuvenated. But even adventure gets tiring, and I missed the comfort of home. I did some light recon on Victoria's situation. Things seemed calm. No news was good news. I'd even lined up a new job. A person can't just drift forever. Back in my apartment, I spent hours cleaning, clearing out months of accumulated dust and junk until the place was sparkling. Exhausted, I shuffled to the fridge. Did I buy Coke? Whatever, I mumbled, grabbing the can and collapsing onto the sofa. I took a long, satisfying swig and turned on the TV. As I watched, my eyelids grew heavier and heavier, until consciousness slipped away. When I woke up, my head was thick and groggy. I opened my eyes and they went wide with shock. My hands and feet were tied securely. An old enemy seeking revenge? I couldn't think of anyone. Forcing myself to stay calm, I sensed a familiar presence approaching. A pair of hands wrapped around my head from behind, and my face was suddenly enveloped in a soft, fragrant embrace. Honey, a voice purred in my ear. You're finally home. That voice. Boss. I was stunned. What the hell was going on? The magnificent assets finally moved away from my face, and I got a clear look at Victoria. She seemed more mature, somehow. And Victoria moved to my side, turning my head to face her. My eyes widened. She gently stroked her own, noticeably swollen belly, a look of maternal love on her face. I forced a laugh. Boss, congratulations. You're having a baby. Now, could you please untie me? Mr. Vance. The baby's father might get the wrong idea. While shocked, I was trying to piece things together. Victoria had lost her mind and tied me up. My only hope was to talk her into letting me go. But her expression changed. Her eyes seemed to sparkle as she pressed my head firmly against her stomach. What are you talking about, honey? This is your baby. What? I couldn't hold back. Boss, I'm still a virgin. How could I have a kid? Victoria didn't answer. She just smiled, licking her lips as she looked at me. Suddenly, a flood of memories played back in my mind like a movie. No, couldn't be. I managed a strained, humorless smile. Are you telling me that all those mornings I woke up feeling sore was because... I looked at her, desperate for an answer. Instead of words, a pair of warm, soft lips pressed against mine, silencing me. It was a deep, dizzying kiss, sweet and intoxicating. When she finally pulled back, her face was flushed. What do you think? She murmured. Okay, I had my answer. But, you're one that got away. Victoria, I think we should untie Mr. Miller. Just then, Julian Vance walked into the room, looking at me apologetically. Shut up. Victoria snapped at him. If you hadn't been so vague in the first place, my husband never would have left. Julian retreated a few steps, muttering, I was just trying to have a little fun. It's not like you were direct about your feelings. Either, and you're blaming me. A sharp glare from Victoria silenced him. If you say one more word, I'm calling Aunt Carol and telling her that her precious son's company is about to go bankrupt and he can forget about that investment. Julian panicked, waving his hands frantically. No, no, don't do that. Come on. I'm your cousin. I helped you. I spied on Leo for you. I put the drug in the coke. I even helped you carry him in here. He kept rambling, but Victoria just waved a dismissive, annoyed hand at him. He slunk out of the room, shooting me an apologetic look as he left. I was completely bewildered. So that's what happened. The whole reason I thought she had a past love was because I'd overheard her parents talking about how close she and Julian were, how much they missed those days. Then I saw a photo of them together, looking incredibly close. I'd even asked the family's longtime housekeeper if Victoria had a white moonlight, and the woman had confirmed it. With my extensive knowledge gleaned from years of reading romance novels, it was a classic setup. The unforgettable ex goes abroad. The heroine is heartbroken. Her parents pressure her to marry, so she finds a fake husband. Now, it seemed I was the world's biggest idiot. He's your... Victoria looked at me and smiled. My one that got away. You didn't know? She was teasing me. Stop messing with me. He's your cousin. She was still smiling. He is my one that got away. She reached out and gently traced my face. My nose, my lips, my ears. Though, she whispered. Julian is his real name. Moonbeam was his old nickname. When he was a teenager, he got this dumb idea that calling himself Moonbeam was a clever move. That way, he'd be every girl's dream guy. He even wanted to legally change his name to Dream Husband. But my aunt beat the sense back into him. But the nickname stuck for years, until he got sick of it and insisted on being called Julian. My aunt's family had a falling out with my parents when I was in high school and moved overseas. We lost touch. My parents forbade us from even mentioning them, but I knew they missed her. Victoria pressed her head against my chest, a possessive, almost feral smile on her face. But you were just so adorable, honey. She poked my nose playfully. You were jealous because of him. It makes me so happy. Could I tell her I wasn't? She stood up, taking my hand and placing it on her chest. I instinctively squeezed, and she let out a soft gasp, her cheeks flushing. Don't worry, honey. My heart belongs only to you. You might not remember, but we met 16 years ago. She held up a small, familiar charm. Just like that girl at the party, I lost my favorite charm. It was pouring rain, and I was all alone, searching and searching. And then you appeared, like a hero. Her eyes shone, lost in the memory. You were so small you barely came up to my shoulder, but you acted like a little adult, looking me up and down like some kind of tiny pervert. You led me to a diner, gave me the steamed buns you'd bought with your own pocket money, and then you ran back out into the rain. Just when I thought you weren't coming back, you returned with my charm. You were soaked to the bone, but you stood there so proud, puffing out your chest and telling me to call you Big Brother. Then you dragged me to your house to get dry and have dinner. You were all alone, a little kid, and you made me the most delicious meal I've ever had in my life. Victoria pressed her hands to her cheeks, her face a mask of pure bliss. Oh, you were so cute. I wanted to kidnap you and take you home right then and there, my sweet boy. She looked at me, her eyes practically shooting hearts. But I knew I couldn't. That would have been selfish. So I watched you, every day. She turned on a large screen on the wall, and it instantly filled with pictures of me, from childhood to the present day. In class, riding my bike, playing basketball, sleeping. There were even pictures of me, in the bathroom, and the shower. She was a psycho, but Victoria seemed to find nothing strange about it. I let you grow up healthy and happy, shaping you into the man I wanted. And then, it was time to harvest. I'm so glad you never had a girlfriend. I would have had to intervene. She wrapped her arms around me. I found the perfect reason to bring you into my company, and then I nurtured you, helped you grow. And you didn't disappoint. You're just as capable as I knew you would be, my love. But, she paused. Even if you weren't, it wouldn't have mattered. I would have taken care of you. All that matters is that we're together. Forever. She stroked her belly. I was going to tell you, but I was afraid you couldn't handle it all at once. This way is better. You've had a 3-month vacation to rest and process things, and our baby is on the way. Everything is moving toward our perfect life. She leaned close, her breath warm against my ear. Honey, I love you so much. Goosebumps erupted all over my skin. I'd heard the word honey more today than in my entire life. Honey, I want you. I immediately protested. No way. You're pregnant. She placed a finger on my lips. It's fine. It's safe during the second trimester. Besides, she leaned into my ear, her hot breath sending shivers down my spine. I can use other ways. She slowly moved lower. Don't. I struggled weakly. Oh, what the hell? A beautiful, brilliant, crazy wife who was completely devoted to me? Only a fool would say no. For months later. Honey, it hurts. I gripped Victoria's hand as she squeezed mine with all her might. It's okay. It's okay. I'm right here. I talked to her, reminding her of our story, about how, after that day, we prepared the nursery together, shopped for baby clothes, how I cooked healthy meals for her, and how she'd sneak barbecue behind my back, only for me to scold her before we finished it off together. I talked about her belly growing bigger, how walking became more difficult, and how I was there for every step. She had smiled and said, "We're like a little old couple already. It's perfect. We have to grow old together, honey." Yes, I'd promised, squeezing her hand. Together, until we're old and gray. I recounted all of it. Then, after one last cry of pain, the sound of a baby's wail filled the room. Victoria went limp with exhaustion. Honey, she sobbed. I held her hand tightly, my own tears falling. The birth of this new life marked the beginning of our new life. I knew that postpartum depression was a real risk. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her sad, or angry, or blaming herself, so I took over everything. I was by her side constantly, changing diapers, wiping bottoms, and soothing our baby to sleep. Every night, I stayed with her, and the moment our child cried, I was there. After the first month, I started taking them out for slow walks, to feel the sun and the breeze. We'd stroll through the neighborhood, watching people go by, watching the other children play with so much energy. Victoria loved to read, so I read with her. We discussed our thoughts, shared good food. We watched movies at home and listened to music, dreaming about our child's future. I love you, honey, Victoria said one afternoon, turning to kiss me suddenly. Thank you. Meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. If I find you in the next life, I'll grab onto you and never let go. I'll tie you up all over again. I smiled. I love you too. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I paused. But, in the next life, maybe just ask nicely. Tying me up takes too long. I grinned. I'm perfectly happy to be a kept man. Victoria burst out laughing and threw herself into my arms.